Hello, my name is Shayn Pierce-Cottler, and I'm a professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Virginia. And this is,
And I am Matthew Cottler. I'm a seventh grader at Charlottesville Catholic School.
and we have made a learning short series for iTHRIV, and the title is A 3-Minute Research Spiel. So I invited Matthew along today because, like us, all scientists at every level have to give research spiels. And I think there's a formula that is pretty easy to follow that's useful for any age. And I thought we could let Matthew here give it a try for a scientist at the 7th grade level. But it's just as useful for scientists at any level.
Yeah.
All right, so the first question that you ask when giving a research spiel is, who is your audience? And this could be a whole range of different people. It could be, for example, your grandmother, prospective student, or a faculty recruit. It could be your peers, or it could be faculty mentors, or even a prospective employer. So who is your audience, Matthew?
Mine was a parent or community volunteer at the Charlottesville or Piedmont Regional Science Fair.
That's right. So Matthew did a science fair project this past year, and we're going to use that as our example. All right. So before you even start with your research spiel, it's important to introduce yourself with a smile. So Matthew, you want to give it a go?
Hi, my name is Matthew Cottler. I'm currently a seventh grader working at CCS. If you're interested in my project, I would like to tell you about my research for a few minutes.
Great job. So after that part, then it's just a matter of going through what I propose as a 7-step strategy. All right, so let's start with step 1. Step 1 is describing the motivation for your project. So typically, in biomedical research, the motivation for our projects fall into one of two categories. It's either you're working on a problem that needs a solution, or you're addressing a question that needs an answer. So this could be, for example, a disease that needs a better treatment or a cure, or a surgical procedure that needs a new tool, or a diagnostic approach that needs to be more reliable and faster. If you're working on some questions, it could be like, why do some stem cells turn into cancer cells? Or how does aging impact blood flow in the brain? Or how does a certain gene mutation contribute to heart failure? So Matthew, I'm curious, what was the motivation for your project?
Well, there was multiple reasons, but I think the main one was that it could help with drug delivery into the stomach with gelatin, because I never actually stated that, but it was a project on gelatin, testing different types of bone gelatin, like testing different types of bone, seeing which animal bone could produce the most gelatin, and how could it not necessarily the most, but what animal gelatin produces what different properties. So it could help with drug delivery because many like pills and stuff have a gelatin capsule. So say turkey bone, if that dissolves very fast in stomach acid, then that could be a quick delivery drug. Or if there's a bone, say beef bone, that dissolves very slowly in an acid, then that could be for slow drug delivery.
Great, that's a great motivation. All right, so step 2 is addressing what is the justification for your motivation. And by this, I mean, if you're working on a problem that needs a solution, for example, a disease that might need a treatment or a cure, you could say the motivation is that the existing treatments are insufficient because they're only effective in 20% of patients, or their negative side effects are debilitating, or they only work until the tumor becomes resistant, or they only treat the symptoms and not the underlying cause. If you're working on a question that needs an answer, example could be, we have a knowledge gap because, for example, there's conflicting evidence in literature. Nobody's investigated this mechanism before, but there is preliminary data that suggests it could be important, etc. So the bottom line is a really good way to justify your motivation is to present a little snippet of evidence. So Matthew, what was the justification for your motivation?
Well, I kind of said that before. Mainly, it just like it can help with all sorts of different like medical and pharmaceutical aspects of life. And yeah.
Great. And I think this is also a nice step, a nice opportunity, I should say, to point out the innovation. So you could talk about what is new about your project that goes beyond what others have done. So in step 3, the question that you're trying to answer is, how can you compel others to endorse your motivation? And by this, I mean, for example, painting a picture of the impact your project will have on the future. So if we can identify a solution, the payoff could be having a better treatment will extend life expectancy or reduce healthcare costs or improve quality of life or reduce the number of hospital readmissions. Or if we can answer this question, the payoff will be suggesting a novel drug treatment approach or identifying a new drug target or guiding the development of future therapies or helping stratify patients into specialized treatment groups. So if you want to pause here and think for a minute about what is the picture of the future that will compel your audience to really get on board with the motivation for your project. Matthew, what was the motivation way you compelled others to get on board with your motivation?
Well, basically, just the fact that I was working with different pharmaceutical things that could, like, some different animals could help with that, like medicine. It was helping, like, other people got on board with it because they're like, oh, if my family member ever gets sick, I can use this type of gelatin as a capsule for medicine.
That's a great way to compel people. And step 4, how will you carry out your project? Well, I think this is probably the easiest step for most people. It's basically summarizing your approach or your plan in a few sentences. So you could, for example, describe the system that you're studying and how you will use it. Or you could talk chronologically through an example experiment or a simulation. We will start by doing such and such, then we will move on to so and so. Finally, we will get to this last part, and in the end, what we will get out of this is so on and so forth. Again, this is another opportunity where you can paint the innovation for your audience and really elaborate on what hasn't been done before by others to showcase how new your project is. Okay, so step 5. This is where you tell the audience where your project currently stands. So for example, this is a year-long project and we're about 3 months into it, or so far we've been able to accomplish such and such, or our preliminary data to date suggests that so and so, or our next steps are to so on and so forth. So for this, it's a nice summary of where you are, and it opens up the door to show where you're headed. And last but not least, step 6, you end where you started. And in this, I think it's helpful to basically summarize in reverse parts 1 through 3. And this is also a great place to show your personal connection to your research. So for example, if we have a project relating to breast cancer, part 3 would be if we are successful in completing this project, healthcare costs will be reduced and quality of life will be enhanced for the 260,000 people who are diagnosed with breast cancer annually. And this will provide caregivers with a more effective treatment for combating breast cancer. Last but not least, gives you an opportunity to show how you're personally connected to the project. So Matthew, what was your personal connection to the project?
It's kind of a funny story, but basically one lunch, some of my friends were like eating Jello, and I was like, "Did you know there's bones in there?" And like, "There's no bones in Jello," and I was like, "Yeah, there are." And I like got into this big argument with them, and I brought in a whole like college paper about bones in Jello, and they still didn't believe me because they thought I wrote it, and it was like 6 pages long, so kind of weird. But yeah, I was like, I wanted to prove them wrong by making an entire science fair project about it.
That's great, Matthew. All right, and last, the final step, asking if the audience has any questions.
Do you have any questions?
Well done, Matthew. So if you'd like to view some really outstanding examples of research spills, I would encourage you to visit the website of the UVA Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Affairs, where you can find the previous winners of the annual UVA 3-minute thesis competition. And the link is provided on the screen. Another fun experience, if you really want to hone your ability to speak to any audience, is to challenge yourself to summarize your research project using the UpGo 5 text editor, which is a website that will enable you to use only the top 1,000 words used in the English language to describe your research, as I have done here for my research. You can see it's quite entertaining. And last but not least, if you want to extend your 3-minute research spiel to a 10 or 30-minute research spiel, say for a different audience, a lab meeting or a collaboration presentation, you can still follow the same 7 steps that Matthew and I went through, and just add a bit more detail to step 4 and step 5. So with that, we'd like to thank you for your attention and encourage you to visit the iTHRIV website for more educational videos and content.